Alright, good morning. Today's a little follow-up, if you will, or addendum to a previous video I didn't realize I'd actually made. This has to do with determining when you need to do some service to your battery connections. So I put a battery in this thing in June. This is now January. So some interesting things to look for. One of the things I noticed was that my voltmeter got to put out, and this is after I put a new battery in it, so it started drifting down a little bit below the 13 volts, which is okay because when the battery's well charged, that tells you the voltage. When it needs to be charged, it'll go up higher, show you that it's charging at 13, 14 volts or whatever. So generally they stick straight up. This kind of thing comes from probably the aviation world back in the day when they used to have multi-engine, like a Boeing 707, and it'd have in the panel there'd be, I don't know, 24 gauges at least, engine gauges. So instead of having to look at each one and spend all that time looking at the panel instead of out where you're doing navigating or whatever, they would turn all the gauges to that normal operating range. The needles were all pointing straight up. Doesn't matter what the range of the gauge was, they turned them all so they're straight up, and you could simply scan the panel. Anything that was out of whack, not pointing straight up, you had a problem. These basically work the same way. So the needles will basically be close to straight. Your temperature is going to be close, your oil pressure, you can see the middle of the range of the oil pressures, everything going there usually straight up. So that kind of gives you an indication. The farther this gets off, either way really, tells you have an indication. So that was one little thing. It's just kind of odd. It started drifting down a little bit. The other weird thing was I would have problems with my turn signals. I started to have issues with the turn signals. It's like they'd stop flashing. And it's like, that's not good, because where I live I have to slow down. It's not an area where there's a normal road so that people would know absolutely going to stop there. So I always looked in my rear view mirror to make sure nobody's going to run into me. But if I didn't know my turn signal was working, it was got a little antsy there. Are they going to know that I'm stopping at all other than my brake lights? So that concerned me a little bit. They should look like that. So they started acting up on me. And there was a third thing. What was the third thing? Well, I should have done this last night when I was cruising. But, oh, and the other thing. Yes, indeed. The one that really started getting to me. I would come out and start the truck, and my radio would have turned off. So it'd go, resets back to 1 o'clock. So every time if I wanted the clock on there, I had to, well, first I had to turn the radio back on. Now it held at stations for whatever reason. It's got something that keeps that going. But I have to reset the clock. So I start 1 o'clock. If I came out and I came to lunch and left at close to 1 o'clock, I wouldn't even notice. And they'd be off by, who knows, 10, 15 minutes, and that kind of hung me up. So yesterday, everything starts up fine. The radio had been holding its clock for a while. That sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? The time was staying on there, so I reset the clock on it. Went to stop and get gas, filled it up, came back out and tried to start it, and all I got was 1/2 a click. Not the click, 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 clicking, as if the solenoid's not getting enough juice. Just one click and the panel went dead. And that's like, oh, that's not good, because I have a new battery. My battery fried. So luckily I happen to have a voltmeter with me. Went out there and checked my voltage at the battery, which I had to kind of poke it around in several places to get a voltage reading, which is kind of an indication right there. So I went out there, and I'd done this a month before. Went out there and wiggled around the cables, and let's just cruise out there. Mind you, at this point I got all these symptoms that, as far as I know, they're not generally related, right? So in the other video, which I will put a link to down there, I went over how to go ahead and check your cables and clean them up. I just say this thing was put in 7 months ago now. So I went over here and wiggled my cables, and this was a month ago, and I didn't notice anything wrong. So I came back out here last night in the gas station, and I was able to push this negative one around. So I pulled that off of there, cleaned up the terminal on that, stuck it back on. I said, okay, it was just a little bit loose. Went back in, same thing, one click, panel went dead. So I took the negative cable back off and pulled these back off, and sure enough, this bolt is rusty. In between there, if you look at that other video, it'll show you the stack up that's in this thing. I had to trim some of the plastic off of it, make a better connection, clean everything up, clean the bolt up, because if these terminals, you can't get voltage at these terminals on the outside with a voltmeter, it means they're not getting the voltage. So it is possible if you were to try to jump this thing, put jumper cables on it, you might have got it to start. But that wouldn't have told you the whole story, because the connection between the battery and the battery cables was no good. So basically I had to clean all this stuff up, and sitting next to the gas pumps, of course, but I carry enough stuff that it really doesn't matter. Got all that taken care of. Came back in to start it. I was pretty confident at that point. And there we go. Hunky-dory. Well, you can see now where my voltmeter's going. It's reading higher. The oil pressure stands up. When the temperature's up, it's to the left of that needle there, so that's what I'm talking about on that. But here's the interesting thing. First, my clock didn't go down. Well, it's only once. And my turn signals are now bright and steady, no problem, they work fine. So apparently they were related to that too, which is really weird to me. But anyway, that's basically what I'm trying to say here, is if you start having issues, you know, every once in a while in fact, I did have some starting issues. I did try to start it a couple times and had to try it once or twice, 3 times to get it to go, which I knew was coming. So I knew there was an issue. It was just a matter of like, well, it's been working most of the time. Knowing now that the other indications, the clock dropping on the radio and my voltmeter coming down and those turn signals acting up, telling me it's time to do something. So if you're getting ready to take a trip or something and think, oh, it'll probably be fine, whatever, go do yourself a favor. Go and pull your battery cables off, clean them all up real good, make sure you got a really good connection in there, because that's one of those things like brakes you don't want to mess with. You want to be able to start this thing if you got to go somewhere in a hurry, especially if you're on the road and you're in another state somewhere. That's the last thing you want to do, get stuck somewhere at a gas station, in the rain, a convenience store, anywhere where you're sitting out there and it's raining and now you can't start, you can't go anywhere. So that's about it. Just wanted to discuss that. Something to look for, which is pointing you towards, you need to clean those battery cables, and I got details on the other one. So that's about it. Keep them going. This one's now got 316,000 miles on it. It'll be 27 years old now. It's 2023. Going strong. All right, good luck, take care. And the final tip for this, as I forgot, as a final thing, you got, basically I look at 3 options. One is to get a can of battery protectant spray from auto parts store and spray down your terminals good. I'm a little cheapskate, so the other thing I use is Vaseline or any kind of petroleum jelly. You can get like a little acid brush or an old toothbrush or something and just cover them all up with Vaseline, and it'll keep them things from corroding. Or good old WD-40. I love WD-40. I spray my entire engine down in WD-40. So if you spray your terminals, that should keep them from having any issues. I use WD-40 on all my aluminum parts. Keep everything from. WD-40 stands for water displacement attempt number 40, I believe is the official thing. So water displacement formula number 40. We used to use it especially in the old days if you drive through a puddle The old electrical systems used to be not so good, so it would short out because things would get wet. And if you had a can of WD-40, you could basically just spray it over all the electrical parts. It makes the water separate, breaks the contact, the electrical contact, and it'll start right up. So I literally spray all my electrical parts, including all my metal parts, keep them from corroding. Works great on battery terminals. Should help that from corroding. And hopefully I'll get more than 6 months out of having to deal with that. But, all right, I think that'll do it.